Hello, Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, they call it the Final Four, but by Monday there will only be two, and then there will be the one. We will look at the prestigious tournament for which New Orleans has been one of its most frequent stops. We'll also examine the numbers of the post-COVID tourism revival. In politics, we will examine the implications of a gubernatorial veto being overridden and a senator possibly wanting to be governor himself. Elsewhere, New Orleans DA Jason Williams will soon be the defendant in a federal trial, and we will hear the tragic story of a double murder and the sometimes spiraling implications of street justice. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, John Simerman, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Tyler Bridges, political reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And we will stay with Tyler right now because gubernatorial or veto by the governor was overridden in a special session of a session within a session.
Right, that happened on Wednesday. It was a pretty dramatic event because no governor had been overridden against his wishes since Buddy Roemer in 1991, 31 years ago. And the Republican-controlled legislature last year tried to override the governor on a bill banning transgender athletes from women's sports, but that effort failed by 2 votes, and that seemed to be an important vote at the time. But the governor vetoed the map that the legislature, during the special session in February, drew for the new maps for the congressional seats, the 6 congressional seats. So the governor vetoed that, saying it's not fair that in a state where 1/3 of the state's residents are black people, that only 1 of the 6 seats is designed to elect a black person. So he vetoed the map, and then the legislature went into a special session within the regular session on Wednesday. It wasn't clear beforehand which way it would go. We knew it was going to be close, but in the end, the Republicans all stayed together. They pulled over 1 Democrat and the 3 independent voters of the House and prevailed narrowly. So the governor, again, was overridden for the first time since 1991.
So what does that say to any potential future disagreement over legislation?
You know, that's a great question, Marcia. And the feeling I have gotten from talking to legislators is that sort of the door was broken down, the glass ceiling was broken. I think this will allow the Republicans who control the legislature are going to feel emboldened and know that under certain circumstances they can override the governor again. Now, this marks a sharp change in the traditional relationship where in Baton Rouge the governor has been all-powerful. The governor dictates what happens, and the legislature traditionally has been subservient. But that has now changed with this Republican legislature and this Democratic governor.
But I think one point that needs to be qualified is that when this is talked about, it's talked about in terms of race. But really, I think what's really motivating the people, certainly the legislators, is party. It's a major party issue because it affects the balance of power in Congress. This is really a national politics issue, especially later on this year when you have the national elections and you could have a turnover in what's the majority party or not. And so, the Republican Party doesn't want to do anything to lose a party seat. And so race is identified with it, and to the extent that race is identified with party, but it's really all about party.
Well, I would say it involves both, but clearly the fact that Republicans did not want to lose a congressional seat here, it was exemplified that by not a single Republican breaking ranks on Wednesday's override vote in either the House or the Senate.
So, okay, so what's the next step now?
So they're going back into regular session on Monday. The big issues there are the governor and the legislature have $3.4 billion in one-time money to spend. That's money that would be either put in the rainy day fund or spent on new bridges or renovating bridges or road work or things like that. And the governor's big ticket item is taking $500 million of that, setting it aside to begin work on a new bridge over the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge. And the governor also wants to give teachers a pay raise of at least $1,500 a year. It's his goal to reach what they call the Southern average, that teachers would make as much as the teachers in other Southern states. But Republicans have not joined with him on those measures yet. But again, there's going to be a lot of money to be spent, and then there'll be some fights, particularly over that transgender bill that passed last year that the governor vetoed. It was not overridden on. We're going to see a fight on that bill as well this year.
So on the congressional districts, let's go back to that for a second. This is in court already, is it not?
Yeah, the final word. What we saw Wednesday was a political fight. Now it's going to go to a legal fight where nonprofit groups, the ACLU, the NAACP, have filed suit saying that this map approved by the legislature is unconstitutional, and so we're going to wait to see what the courts say on that.
When does this have to be resolved?
Yeah, so qualifying is a number of months away in August, and we're talking about these maps will have to be in place with plenty of time for candidates to qualify by then, and then the actual voting for these new districts will be taking place in the primary in November.
So, Tyler, can the courts actually, if they want to make a change, can they make the change, or can they tell the legislature go back and draw the maps?
Yeah, I think courts traditionally would be reluctant to actually draw new maps, but they have done that. More likely is they would say to the legislature and the governor, "Hey, you guys come up with something that everybody can agree on." But the legislature and the governor have already shown they can't. So it's quite possible that if the courts think that this new map, with a 5-to-1 Republican advantage, if they think it's unconstitutional, it's possible they could draw new maps themselves.
And across the country, there'll probably be several courts considering lawsuits from their legislature about redistricting. That always happens during redistricting. Some side is satisfied, and it goes to court back and forth.
Yeah, we've seen this already in other states, and so it's not a surprise that it would be happening in Louisiana as well.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Thanks a lot, Tyler. All righty, let's go on to over to John right now. And Orleans Parish DA Jason Williams, a date is soon to be set for his trial.
Indeed, yes. The District Attorney Jason Williams has had a pretty good run of late. His prosecutors have come out of the gate strong in trials since trials resumed at the courthouse, the Orleans Parish Courthouse. He's gotten a handful of guilty verdicts. And over in federal court, his case where he is going to be tried on tax fraud conspiracy charges alongside his law partner Nicole Burdett. They got a favorable ruling from a federal appeals court this week that limits the evidence that the government, the federal prosecutors can present about Williams's past tax troubles, which they were civil troubles, and they included liens and late payments and filings. Martin Feldman, the federal judge who died in late January after 39 years on the bench, who was presiding over the case, had ruled in December to limit this evidence. The appeals court agreed with that, so that clears the way for a trial. There was a trial scheduled to begin on January 24th before the government appealed his decision. Turns out Feldman died 2 days later on the 26th. So that could have caused an issue, but this thing was held up on appeal. Now it's in the hands of District Judge Lance Afric. He's a veteran, former prosecutor, and he's going to set a new trial date on the 10th or 11th, I believe.
Of April, he'll set
Yes.
and that's when the date will be set.
Correct.
Right? Any idea, what we should anticipate in terms of the length of this trial?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of weeks that they're planning on, or at least that's what Feldman planned on. I think it's sort of up to Lance Afric at this point about how this trial goes.
So, John, is it anticipated that when he sets the date for the trial, whenever it will be, that it'll actually go, or are there other arguments? Perhaps
It's
that
hard
would
to
delay
tell
it?
because this is a new judge, and he may want to look at some other things a little bit differently than Martin Feldman did. Judge Feldman was considered to have issued some rulings and done some things pre-trial in that case that were favorable to Jason Williams in terms of how he looked at the case and protecting Jason Williams regarding the potential that evidence would prejudice against him. He was generally considered a skeptic of the government in many cases. And so this moves over to a new judge. Feldman was going to go on the 24th. I spoke with him a month before, and he was rearing to go. So in terms of a trial posture, it's pretty ready.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see what happens in the weeks ahead. Thanks a lot, John. Errol, let's go on over to you right now. And big weekend in basketball here in the city of New Orleans.
Yeah,
Sure,
a couple of stories. In 1982, the Final Four was in New Orleans, and the championship game, the Monday night game, was between North Carolina and Georgetown. With a minute left to go, Georgetown took the lead, and so North Carolina got the ball. They huddled, and then they came out. They threw the ball to one of their players who did a leap shot. He made it, and Georgetown wound up winning by a point, winning the national championship.
I mean, North Carolina won.
Yeah, North Carolina won. The player who made that shot was named Michael Jordan, and that was really sort of like the birth of the Michael Jordan legend. I mean, he was well known within college basketball at that point, but this was before a huge national audience, and it was all Michael Jordan. And so really, that game at the Superdome was very important in terms of Michael Jordan's career. Another thing, the NCAA is like the top tier of college sports. There's another level, which is a respectable level, called the NAIA. And a couple of weeks ago, Loyola won the NAIA national championship. So we're already the home of the NAIA national championship in basketball. Plus, it'll be the place where the NCAA champion will be determined. Plus, the Pelicans are playing pretty well right now, too, so they might make the playoffs. So all of a sudden, people say New Orleans isn't the basketball town, but for this brief time, we're sort of like the basketball epicenter. But anyway, the tournament is here. This is like the 6th time that the tournament has been here. Most places where it's been multiple times. There's only like 9 cities in the country that are really eligible to host this tournament because of the requirements. Like you have to have an indoor playing facility that'll hold at least 60,000 people. You have to be able to guarantee, I think it's something like 10,000 hotel rooms. Then you put up money, and you have to be seen as having good nearby transportation. And so all the criteria that they have really limits it. And so New Orleans is honored to be in this crowd. It's a very prestigious tournament to have.
And so competition, tomorrow is the actual Final Four, the 4 teams that are vying to play in the championship game, right?
Yeah, the big game is the old North Carolina game. It's North Carolina versus Duke. Then the other game is Kansas versus Villanova. So the winners of those 2 games will meet Monday night. The losers of those 2 games, I guess, can either go home or stay and enjoy New Orleans.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Just stay in and just stay. If they can, they'll be disappointed, but they can still have fun here. So you noted it's going to be in the Superdome because the crowds are going to be so big. I mean, of course, the Pelicans play in the arena.
Oh yeah, the arena could never qualify for a tournament of this magnitude. It'd have to be something like a football stadium with a dome on it.
Yeah. Okay. Big weekend, like we said in basketball, and certainly a lot of folks coming down for it. So, Dawn, that brings us over to you. They're going to be staying in our hotels.
They will.
And we expect a whole lot of them to be here. But, we're not beyond the pandemic. We still have to be concerned about COVID. But tourism really took a big hit during this pandemic. Tourism definitely did. Hotel rooms, their stays were just way down. So how are we looking now?
We actually are looking very, very good, especially for this weekend. But surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, business plans go out years and years and years in advance, and they don't always plan for, or not usually plan for, pandemics, changing things. So we actually added hotel rooms in the city of New Orleans, some very famous hotel rooms. The Four Seasons at the Old World Trade Center opened. The new Virgin Hotel opened. Lots of hotels opened during COVID times, and they are seeing much success, especially this weekend. New Orleans & Company expects hotel occupancy rates this weekend, especially Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, to be in the high 90 percentile. We reached the high 90 a couple of times during COVID times, both with the Sugar Bowl and with big meetings in town, but generally we've been far, far below that. For example, during Mardi Gras in 2020, We were at 70% the Thursday before Mardi Gras. This year, we were at 59%. In 2020, at 98% on that Saturday before Mardi Gras. This year at 85%. So it's slowly ticking back up.
Dawn, what kind of rates are these hotels getting?
Well, the rates for this particular weekend, I checked kind of across the board, and I'll just throw some out there. There wasn't availability at a lot, and this was just simply me clicking the individual hotel online. I didn't try hotels.com or Expedia or any of those places. I went directly to the hotel websites and tried. The Four Seasons is sold out. The new Canopy Hilton is sold out. The Higgins Hotel and the Chloe Hotel sold out. The Hotel St. Vincent on Magazine Street in the Lower Garden District had availability for Saturday night at $2,029 per night. The new Virgin Hotel also had availability at $1,597 a night. Then I said, what about, maybe not so fancy? Let's try the DoubleTree Hotel. The DoubleTree downtown or in the French Quarter had no availability. So, well, what about that person who likes a name brand that they're familiar with around the country, and they decide they're going to go stay at the DoubleTree in Kenner? The Kenner DoubleTree did have availability this weekend. It was $489 a night for Saturday night to stay in Kenner. So our hotels across the board are doing well. There are 26,000 hotel rooms between downtown and the French Quarter. That's what makes us such a good destination for things like the Final Four. This Final Four is expected to bring in more than the $170 million in revenue the last Final Four did. But I'm told there still is a large problem that's nationwide, and that is staffing shortages. The hotels are about 25% down in terms of their staff at this point. So the restaurants can't operate as much as they might want to, or the rooms don't get cleaned every day, they get cleaned every other day, or all sorts of things like that. But as these events continue to happen and there's some stability in the marketplace in terms of the hotels knowing they'll have these occupancy rates, those staffing levels should go up because people can know it's a dependable job. And we've got, coming on the heels of the Final Four, we've got French Quarter Fest and Jazz Fest and Essence Fest and all of those things coming back. So, these new fancy hotels are coming in at new fancy prices, especially this weekend.
Certainly this weekend. But like you mentioned, we're, on the cusp now of French Quarter Fest, and then after that, the Jazz Fest. So what's it looking like in terms of occupancy for our hotels for those?
They don't have obviously don't have final numbers yet, but looking as good as this weekend is, high 90s again. So the average in American hotels right now, I believe, is in the low 60s, kind of if you looked across the board at hotels, that's what they average. So anytime you can hit those peak periods of 90%, the hotels are bringing in certainly added revenue, and that's lots and lots of tourist tax dollars coming into the region.
I think about the Jazz Fest. The Jazz Fest is 2 weekends, and there are some people who come in for both weekends, which means they stay in the hotel that whole week in between. So anybody can come to New Orleans and stay in a hotel for a week. We got a high roller here. This is the kind of person we want, and so we get those people too.
Well, with these kind of rates for the Final Four, it's not just the hotels that have the high rates. The airfare is extremely expensive for this weekend too. So we're not getting, even though these are college games, I don't think we're getting too many poor college students coming to town. We're getting people who are coming to town with pockets full of money.
Well, it's a great shot in the arm for tourism here, and for the tourism industry, which has needed a big shot in the arm after these 2 years of the pandemic. And so we welcome everybody, and we hope everyone has a good, safe time.
Yes.
All righty, thanks, Dawn. John, back over to you. Heard a story over the past week or so, sad story, and this regards a double murder that happened about a year ago, and what police are saying or suspecting could be a retaliation type of shooting.
Yeah, it's a very sad story. It involves the arrest of Bokio Johnson. He's a 46-year-old electrician whose two of his two oldest children, Breonna Brown, who was 25, Caleb Johnson, who was 18, were killed on the West Bank in an apartment complex in what police were saying was a gun deal gone bad. The person who was booked and indicted in that case, Hollis Carter, was headed with his mom to court when he was gunned down in his car. His mom also was shot. He was killed. Police within a few days, booked Bokio Johnson, the parent of the kids he was, Hollis Carter was alleged to have killed. And so this is sort of one of these retaliatory, or so it appears, and that's what police are saying. And John Fuller, who was Hollis Carter's attorney, defense attorney, also says it was, quote, street justice. You know, it's just really sad. I mean, this was a father who kind of doted on these kids, apparently was heavily involved in their life. Caleb Johnson, if some people may recall, was an Edna Carr High School student. Breonna Brown, who's 25 and killed, she was convicted of manslaughter in a different slang by a non-unanimous jury verdict. And then, so she was out on bond when she was killed, awaiting a decision on a retrial in her case. So that's kind of what happened there. Bokio Johnson is in jail now on $1 million bond. And I spoke with his ex, who is Breonna Brown's mom, who obviously is very upset and trying to help him, and says, you know, if he did this, he was a mess, and she called it an out-of-body experience he must have had, but she doesn't believe that he did. She says that, you know, we're not murderers and we're not into street justice. So we'll see how this fleshes out.
You know, John, you know, just describing this whole situation with the murders of the two young people, and now this, you know, this killing of the accused defendant for these murders, allegedly by the father. I mean, this is just a beyond sad and tragic tale that we hear in the city of New Orleans, in this region, and unfortunately we hear stuff like this a little bit too much.
Yeah, and I think that's why maybe homicide is a different crime, and it's harder to, once it starts going up, to get it under control. You know, homicides are up this year, and last year were, and for the last few years, and you know, this shows how challenging it is to get a handle on it.
You know, challenging and really tragic. All right, John, I guess we'll see how this all plays out. Thanks a lot. Tyler, back over to you. We're going to talk a little bit of politics because our Senator Cassidy has indicated that maybe he would be interested in running for governor.
Yeah, Marcia, we've had several senators over the last 30 years as they're retiring, or 30 or 40 years, look at whether they want to run for governor. Russell Long ended up passing it up. So did Bennett Johnston. So did John Breaux. David Vitter, you'll remember, decided to run for governor in 2015, and he lost to the long shot candidate, John Bell Edwards. And now that Edwards is retiring next year, Senator Bill Cassidy, who was just reelected in 2020, is now thinking about whether he wants to run for governor next year. And that does come as in some ways as a surprise, but in other ways not, because Cassidy broke with President Trump in February of 2021, after Trump had left office. Cassidy cast a vote on the impeachment to convict Trump of what happened on January 6th, accusing Trump of inciting a riot in the effort to block the ascension to power of Joe Biden. And that has made Cassidy an attractive candidate for people who are looking for a moderate candidate. Both Republicans, Democrats, and alike, and even independents are looking for someone. Right now, the candidates for governor appear to be Attorney General Jeff Landry, Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser, and Treasurer John Schroeder. But again, Senator Cassidy has confirmed that he is indeed looking at the possibility of running, and if he does, he doesn't have to give up his Senate seat unless he would win.
You know, some people say it's better to be a senator than to be a governor, because senator, you're prestigious, you're one of 100 people in Washington, you have unlimited terms, and the terms are 6 years. So you've seen it the other way. You know, somebody giving up the governorship to run for Senate. But on the other hand, some people say, well, if you're senator, you know, you're in Washington. If you're governor, you're back home, and it's an executive position. You can be the boss, and you can call the shots on a lot of things.
Yeah, clearly the governor is the center of the political universe in Louisiana. A senator is sort of, in some ways, is an afterthought. You know, obviously it depends what you like A senator, as you mentioned, Errol, is one of 100. It's a big deal. You're probably talking to the president more often. You're more often on the big TV shows, national TV shows.
And you're dealing with national and international politics.
Right, right. Whereas if you're governor, you're probably spending more time in places like Bunkie and Farmerville. But you know, obviously there's an allure for young men and women growing up in Louisiana to want to be governor, to be Huey Long, to be Edwin Edwards, to be the Kingfish, and to exercise the enormous powers that the governor has and live in the governor's mansion and be the center of the political attention in the state. And so Senator Cassidy has indeed confirmed that. But so I wrote a story over this past weekend about his interest in running for governor. The next day I wrote a story, a poll came out by a Baton Rouge pollster named John Couvion that showed that Senator Kennedy actually is viewed unfavorably by more voters in the state than those who view him favorably. In political parlance, he is underwater. He's underwater by 11 points, whereas John Kennedy, who is up for re-election this year to the Senate, he had a 15 percentage point favorability rating. So we don't know yet if Senator Kennedy wins the election as expected, what he would then do. He could run for governor, so could Garrett Graves, the congressman in Baton Rouge, and again, of course, Bill Cassidy. But in some ways, it might be more challenging for Cassidy because he's angered so many conservatives who view his vote against Trump in that impeachment trial as a betrayal.
All righty, Tyler, thanks a lot. So, I mean, the field is far from set at this point in terms of governor of Louisiana. All righty, thanks a lot. Time for other stories. E.
Okay, well, first to Tyler. I've been to Bunkie. It's no Washington, D.C., but it's a nice town. It's a nice, friendly town. Today is the 65th anniversary of Channel 12. It first aired February 1st, 1957. A very important station, a very rare, locally owned station. And April 1st, 1957.
Right.
And a public station. And so we're very proud of it. This weekend, it's airing special programming that it had. And one thing that it did this past year that not much is talked about is that the station produced a documentary about Irma Thomas, a concert she did. And this has been shopped out to public TV stations around the country. And I think it's a couple hundred stations that picked up the Irma Thomas concert. So that's the kind of thing the station has done locally and nationwide.
That's right, and of course also the Kevin Belton cooking series, a number of those too. Those that's nationwide as well. All right, let's go on over to Dawn.
We talked a lot about the Final Four. The next big sports event in town is the Crescent City Classic, which is back in non-virtual form this year. On Saturday, April 16th, they're expecting a very large turnout for that, for a really fun run.
Great. John?
Well, I'm going to shout out to my colleague, Ramon Vargas, extraordinary police reporter who's leaving our shop. Today is his last day, moving on to other pastures, and he's a frequent guest on this show.
Yes, he has.
I want to say thank you to him.
Well, I say thank you and congratulations to Ramon. Good luck on your new venture. All right, Tyler, wrap it up with you.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that Attorney General Jeff Landry appears to be running for governor. Well, my colleague Andrea Gallo came out with a terrific story showing that Jeff Landry has a company, a private company, that his campaigns have paid $420,000 to for staffing purposes over the last 15 years. What exactly that money went for, we don't know, but it was a lot of money into Jeff Landry's pocket.
Okay, I guess we'll be hearing more about that. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, too. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.